Fleet Commander Zextar stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, the inevitable watching the data streams flow across holographic displays. 200 warships stretched out behind him in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark metal that had conquered 1,000 worlds. The hegemony's war machine moved through space like a tide of death, and today they would wash over another primitive civilization. "Commander," his tactical officer hissed through mandibles that clicked with nervous energy. "We're detecting a single vessel approaching from the third planet." Zextar's 4 eyes narrowed. In his 3 centuries of conquest, he had seen desperate last stands before. Dying civilizations always sent something, usually their most advanced ships filled with their bravest warriors. It never mattered. The hegemony's technology was absolute. "Display it." The main screen shifted, showing a lone ship emerging from the blue-green world ahead. Zextar felt his chest cavity vibrate with what his species considered laughter. The vessel looked ancient even by primitive standards. Blocky, crude, with visible seams and plates bolted together like some child's toy. Primitive chemical thrusters glowed orange at its rear, and weapon ports that seemed almost decorative dotted its hull. "Scans, Vex Hun," he commanded his science officer. "Commander, the vessel appears to be remarkably primitive. Iron-nickel alloy hull with ceramic plating, fission reactors, kinetic weapons and crude explosive warheads. No energy shields detected. No gravitational manipulation. It's like something from the ancient archives." The bridge crew exchanged glances that mixed amusement with disbelief. Some worlds surrendered without a fight. Others sent peace envoys. A few launched desperate attacks with their entire fleets. But this was insulting. "How many life forms aboard?" Zextar asked. "Approximately 1,200, Commander. All carbon-based bipeds. Remarkably uniform genetic structure." Zextar studied the approaching ship. It moved with purpose, not fleeing or attempting evasive maneuvers. Its crude engines pushed it directly toward the center of his armada at what these primitives probably considered maximum speed. The ship would reach weapons range in 6 minutes. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let's hear their final words." Static filled the bridge speakers before clearing into an alien voice. The universal translator worked slowly, parsing the crude electromagnetic signals. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance. You have entered restricted space around Earth. Reverse course immediately or face the consequences." Silence fell across the bridge. Then Zextar's laughter echoed through the chamber, joined by his officers. The absurdity was overwhelming. One primitive ship against 200 vessels that could crack planets. "Captain Chun," Zextar replied. "I am Fleet Commander Zextar of the Hegemony. Your world has been selected for pacification. Surrender now and your death will be swift." "Negative. The sovereign territory of Earth is not open for discussion. This is your final warning." The transmission ended. Zextar shook his head in amazement. Did these creatures not understand mathematics? Could they not count? "Commander," his tactical officer reported. "The primitive vessel is still approaching. Weapon systems appear to be charging, though their energy output is minimal." "Let it come within range," Zextar decided. "We'll make an example of them for their world to see. Perhaps watching their champions die will encourage surrender." On the screen, the human ship continued its steady approach. Zextar noticed something odd about its trajectory. It wasn't aiming for his flagship or trying to find an advantageous position. It was heading straight for the center of his formation, as if planning to fight them all simultaneously. "Scan for cloaked vessels," he ordered suddenly. "Hidden weapons platforms. Anything." "Nothing, Commander. Empty space. They're truly alone." Zextar felt a strange sensation in his primary stomach. In all his conquests, he had never encountered such tactical stupidity. Even the most desperate civilizations showed some survival instinct. This was either complete madness or, "Commander, they're opening another channel. Put it through." The same voice crackled across the bridge, but now there was something different in its tone. Not fear or desperation, but something harder to identify. "Fleet Commander Zextar, my name is Captain Sarah Chun. I want you to remember that name. Before this engagement ends, you're going to understand exactly what it means to face humanity." The transmission ended again. Zextar stared at the primitive ship on his screen, now just 3 minutes from weapons range. Something cold moved through his nervous system, an emotion he had not felt in decades. For the first time in his career, Zextar was curious about what would happen next. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the alien armada grow larger on her tactical display. 200 ships, each one probably capable of glassing a continent. Her own vessel, 30 years old, retrofitted twice, held together by determination and the finest engineering humanity could manage, faced them alone. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "we're getting detailed scans of their lead ship. The power readings are significant." "How significant, Lieutenant Morrison?" "Their flagship alone outguns us by a factor of approximately 50 to 1. And that's just what we can detect through their shielding." Sarah nodded calmly. She had expected as much. The preliminary scout data had been clear. This enemy possessed technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities. But the Solar Defense Council had made their decision, and she agreed with it completely. "Status of the package, Commander Rodriguez?" Her first officer checked his board. "Secure and ready, Captain. All systems green." "Good." Sarah turned to address her bridge crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that serving with you has been the honor of my career. Today we represent not just Earth, but every human who ever looked up at the stars and refused to kneel." Around her, officers straightened at their stations. These were volunteers all, people who had requested this assignment knowing full well it was likely a one-way trip. The finest humanity had to offer. "Weapons range in 90 seconds, Morrison reported. Sarah activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage a superior enemy force. They expect us to break, to run, to beg for mercy. They have clearly never met humans before. Today we show them what our species is capable of when we're pushed to the wall." Through the internal cameras, she could see her crew at battle stations throughout the ship. Engineers making final adjustments to systems pushed beyond their designed limits. Gunners loading the last rounds into weapons that would fire until they melted. Marines checking equipment they might never get to use. All of them steady. All of them ready. "Captain," her communications officer spoke up, receiving another transmission from the enemy flagship. "Let's hear it." The alien voice filled the bridge again, translated into flat, mechanical English. "Captain Chun, this is your final opportunity. Surrender now and we will make your end painless." Sarah picked up her microphone. "Fleet Commander Zextar, I have a message for you and your entire armada. Humanity has been waiting for this moment for 50,000 years. Since we first looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. Today you're going to learn why we're the species that conquered our entire solar system before we even learned you existed." She paused, watching the alien ships growing larger. "We have a saying in my language, Commander. Death before dishonor. I suggest you look it up." "Weapons range in 30 seconds, Morrison called out. Sarah felt the familiar calm that had carried her through 3 system conflicts settle over her shoulders. This was what she had trained for her entire career. Not the overwhelming odds, no simulation could have prepared them for this, but the moment when everything depended on her crew's skill and determination. "All stations report ready, Captain," Rodriguez announced. "Thank you, Commander." Sarah settled into her command chair. "Morrison, lock onto their flagship. All weapons. Locked on, Captain. Engineering, I need everything you can give me." Chief Engineer Patterson's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, I've got the fusion reactors running at 115%. The containment fields are holding, but I can't promise for how long." "Understood, Chief. Just keep us in the fight." On the main screen, the alien flagship filled their view. It was massive, easily 10 times the Defiance's mass, covered in weapon ports and shield generators that hummed with deadly energy. Behind it, the rest of the Armada waited like hungry predators. 10 seconds to weapons range, Morrison reported. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. No panic, no hesitation. Just humans doing what they did best when everything was on the line. 5 seconds. The alien ships began to glow as their weapons charged. "We are in range, Captain." Saracen smiled. "Morrison, show them what humanity brought to this fight. Fire everything." The Defiance erupted in light and fury, every weapon firing simultaneously. The ship shuddered as decades of human ingenuity and determination reached out across space toward the alien armada. And in that moment, both sides learned something new about war. The first volley from the Defiance struck the inevitable shields with surprising force. Zextar felt his flagship tremble, as kinetic rounds and primitive missiles hammered against their defensive barriers. The energy readings spiked higher than his sensors had predicted. "Report!" he barked. "Shields down to 93%, Commander," his defensive officer replied, mandibles clicking with confusion. "Their weapons are more effective than scans indicated." Zextar studied the tactical display. The human ship had fired everything simultaneously, a desperate alpha strike that should have exhausted its capabilities. Instead, the vessel was already reloading, its crude but efficient systems cycling through what appeared to be an endless supply of ammunition. "Return fire," he ordered. "Disabling shots only. I want to study this species." The Inevitable's primary batteries spoke, lances of coherent energy that had vaporized entire fleets. They struck the human ship's hull and bounced, scattered. The primitive vessel's armor plating glowed white-hot but held together. "Impossible," breathed his science officer. "Commander, their hull composition is far denser than initial scans suggested. They appear to have layered their armor with materials we didn't detect." Another volley from the Defiance struck home, and this time Zextar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. His shields flickered. For just a moment, the human weapons touched his hull. "How are they penetrating our defenses?" he demanded. "Commander, they're not using energy weapons as we understand them. These are purely kinetic projectiles, but they're moving at relativistic speeds. Our shields are designed to deflect energy, not solid matter at these velocities." Zextar's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display with new attention. The human ship was dancing now, using its primitive thrusters to execute maneuvers that should have been impossible for something so massive. It rolled, twisted, and dove through space while maintaining constant fire. Analysis of their tactical pattern? Chaotic, Commander. No discernible strategy. They appear to be improvising. Another tremor ran through the Inevitable as more human rounds found their mark. This time, warning lights flashed across several stations. "Commander," his tactical officer reported with barely concealed panic. "Their hit ratio is increasing. Whatever guidance systems they're using, they're adapting to our defensive patterns in real time." Zextar watched the human ship execute another impossible maneuver, spinning end over end while continuing to fire. The motion should have torn the vessel apart, yet it held together through what could only be described as superior engineering. "Bring the fleet to bear," he commanded. "All ships, open fire." 200 warships turned their weapons on the lone human vessel. Energy beams that could crack moons converged on the Defiance from every direction. Space itself seemed to burn as the combined firepower of the hegemony's finest battle group focused on a single target. The human ship vanished in a brilliant explosion of light and superheated plasma. Silence fell across the bridge of the Inevitable. Sensor screens cleared slowly as the energy dissipated, revealing empty space where the primitive vessel had been. "Scan for debris," Zextar ordered, feeling a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. "Commander," his science officer said quietly, "I'm detecting an energy signature moving through the plasma cloud." "What kind of signature?" Before the officer could respond, the Defiance burst from the glowing cloud like a phoenix from flames. Its hull was scarred and blackened, entire sections glowing with residual heat, but the ship was intact and still firing. "Impossible!" Zextar's tactical officer shrieked. Nothing could survive that barrage. But as the human ship cleared the plasma cloud, Zextar could see what had happened. The Defiance had somehow predicted the convergence point of their weapons and positioned itself in the exact center. The energy beams had mostly canceled each other out, creating a survivable, barely, pocket in the middle of their own attack. "Commander," communications crackled with an incoming transmission from the human ship. "This is Captain Chun. Did you really think we came here without studying your tactics? Humanity has been watching you conquer worlds for months. We know exactly how you fight." The transmission continued as the battered human ship somehow accelerated, heading directly for the nearest hegemony vessel. "The question is, do you know how we fight?" Zextar watched in fascination as the Defiance approached one of his escort ships. The human vessel was clearly damaged, systems failing, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. Any rational crew would be attempting repairs or looking for an escape route. Instead, the humans were accelerating toward a head-on collision. "Order the Relentless to evade," Zextar commanded. Too late. The Defiance struck the hegemony warship not with its hull, but with a spread of projectiles fired at point-blank range. The escort's shields collapsed instantly under the concentrated barrage, and kinetic rounds tore through armor that had never been breached. The Relentless listed to one side, its primary systems failing. One human ship had just crippled a vessel from the finest fleet in the galaxy. "Commander," his science officer whispered, "what are we fighting?" Aboard the Defiance, damage reports flooded the bridge as Captain Chen fought to keep her ship operational. Half their weapons were offline, life support was failing in 3 sections, and the main reactor was running dangerously hot. But they were still in the fight. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "the Relentless is falling back. Massive damage to their primary systems." Sarah allowed herself a tight smile. 1 down, 199 to go. The odds were still impossible, but they had proven something important: these aliens could bleed. "Morrison, status on the package?" "Still secure, Captain. All systems nominal." "Good. Keep it that way." Sarah studied the tactical display as the alien armada regrouped. They were moving more cautiously now, their perfect formations disrupted. Good. Caution was doubt, and doubt was the beginning of fear. "Captain," her communications officer reported, receiving multiple transmissions from the alien fleet. They appear to be arguing amongst themselves. "Let me hear it." The bridge filled with translated alien voices, overlapping and urgent. Sarah caught fragments, demands for explanations, questions about human capabilities, and underneath it all, something she recognized from her own species. Uncertainty. "Chief Patterson," Sarah called to engineering, "how long can you keep the reactors stable?" "Maybe 20 minutes, Captain. After that, we're looking at either controlled shutdown or catastrophic failure." 20 minutes. Sarah looked at the alien fleet surrounding them. In 20 minutes, this would all be over one way or another. Rodriguez, signal Earth Command. "Full tactical report." "Transmitting now, Captain." As her first officer sent their data home, Sarah thought about the families on Earth who would never know what happened here. The children who would grow up free because 1,200 humans had chosen to stand in the path of an unstoppable force. "Captain," Morrison interrupted her thoughts, "the alien flagship is moving, heading directly for us." On the main screen, the massive vessel approached with obvious intent. Its weapons were powered but not firing yet. Sarah could almost feel the alien commander's eyes on her ship. "Incoming transmission, Captain. Put it through." The familiar voice of Fleet Commander Zextar filled the bridge, but now there was something different in its tone. Respect, perhaps, or wariness. "Captain Chun, I offer you terms. Surrender your vessel and your crew will be granted warriors' deaths. You have fought with honor." Sarah picked up her microphone. "Commander Zextar, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid you still don't understand what you're dealing with." She stood up from her command chair, looking around at her bridge crew. These people, her people, met her gaze with steady determination. Not one of them showed fear. "You see, Commander, you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. You assume we came here to win a battle, that this is some desperate last stand by a dying world." The alien commander's voice crackled back. "Is it not?" Sarah smiled. No, Commander. We came here to deliver a message. And the message isn't for you. It's for every species in the galaxy that's been waiting for someone to prove it could be done. She gestured to Morrison, who nodded and began entering commands into his console. For 50,000 years, humanity has been alone in the dark, wondering if we were the only intelligence in the universe. When we finally detected your empire, we watched you conquer world after world. We studied your tactics, your technology, your psychology. On her tactical display, Sarah could see more alien ships moving into position around the Defiance. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered now except the message. And we learned something interesting, Commander. No one has ever fought back and lived to tell about it. Every species you've encountered has either surrendered immediately or been crushed so quickly that word of their resistance never spread. Captain Chun. The alien commander's voice carried a note of warning. What are you saying? I'm saying that today, for the first time in your species' history, someone is going to survive an encounter with your armada and carry the story to others. Today, every enslaved world in the galaxy is going to learn that the hegemony can be hurt. Sarah nodded to Rodriguez, who activated a new system they had kept hidden throughout the battle. On every screen throughout the ship, a countdown appeared. 10 seconds. You see, Commander, the Defiance isn't just a warship. We're a broadcast platform. For the last 15 minutes, every moment of this engagement has been transmitted across the galaxy using quantum entanglement communicators your sensors can't detect. 5 seconds. Every world you've conquered is watching right now as one human ship fights your entire armada and lives to tell the story. 3 seconds. The alien commander's voice cut across the bridge. What have you done? Sarah Chen smiled as the countdown reached 0. We've started a revolution. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 enslaved worlds, the impossible image appeared on screens both hidden and hijacked. The sight of a single ship, primitive, battered, outgunned, standing against the unstoppable hegemony fleet and not just surviving, but fighting back. On Kepler 442b, the conquered Alterans watched their secret communication networks explode with activity. The humans were real. Someone was actually fighting. On Wolf 359c, the enslaved Zephyrians saw their masters scramble to cut transmissions that appeared faster than they could be blocked. The quantum broadcasts were unhackable, untraceable, and absolutely undeniable. On Proxima Centauri b, the hegemony's administrative center received its first emergency reports. Uprising indicators were spiking across 47 systems. Worlds that had been pacified for decades were suddenly transmitting prohibited signals. And at the center of it all, the Defiance continued to fight. Fleet Commander Zextar stared at his communication displays in growing horror. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. Every world was receiving the human transmission. His perfect victory was becoming a galactic disaster. Cut the transmission, he ordered. We've tried, Commander. His communications officer replied desperately. The humans are using some form of quantum entanglement we've never encountered. We can't jam it, can't trace it, can't stop it. On the main screen, the human ship was listing badly now, atmosphere streaming from multiple hull breaches. But still it fired, still it maneuvered, still it fought with a ferocity that defied all logic. Commander, his tactical officer reported, 6 more ships are requesting permission to withdraw for repairs. The humans' kinetic weapons are causing cumulative damage to our hulls. Zextar felt something crack in his chest cavity. 6 ships. This lone primitive vessel had damaged 6 ships from his elite armada. The finest military force in the galaxy was being mauled by what should have been target practice. Status of the human vessel? Multiple system failures, Commander. They can't have much time left. But even as his officer spoke, the Defiance executed another impossible maneuver, rolling beneath 3 converging energy beams and returning fire with surgical precision. One of Zextar's cruisers staggered as human rounds found a weak point in its shield generators. How long have they been broadcasting? Zextar demanded. 18 minutes, Commander. 18 minutes of the hegemony's invincible fleet being held at bay by 1,200 humans in a ship held together by determination and fury. 18 minutes of every enslaved species in the galaxy watching their masters bleed. Sir, communications crackled with a priority signal from Hegemony High Command. This is Fleet Admiral Vashti. Commander Zextar, what is your status? Zextar closed his 4 eyes. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. But something else was happening too. Something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. He was beginning to understand what these humans meant when they talked about honor. Admiral, we are engaged with a single human vessel. They have inflicted significant casualties and are broadcasting our engagement across the galaxy. Silence filled the channel before the Admiral's voice returned, cold with fury. A single ship, Commander? Yes, Admiral. But they are remarkable. Destroy them immediately. Use any means necessary. Zextar looked at the battered human ship on his screen. It was dying now, systems failing one by one, but still fighting with every remaining weapon. Still broadcasting. Still refusing to surrender. Admiral, I respectfully request permission to offer terms. Denied. Destroy them now. The channel went dead. Zextar stood in the silence of his bridge, watching the impossible sight of a single ship defying the might of the galaxy's greatest empire. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Finally, he spoke. All ships, prepare for maximum bombardment. Target the human vessel. But as his fleet prepared to fire, Zextar found himself hoping that somehow, impossibly, the humans would find a way to survive what came next. Because in 18 minutes, they had changed everything. The revolution had already begun. Captain Sarah Chun felt the defiance shuddering around her as system after system failed. The main reactor was critical, life support was gone in half the ship, and they were down to their last functioning weapons. But the broadcast was still transmitting, still carrying their message across the galaxy. Captain, Rodriguez called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. Quantum communications confirm reception on over 800 worlds. The signal is spreading faster than they can contain it. Sarah nodded, gripping her command chair as another explosion rocked the ship. Through the deck plating, she could feel the rhythm of her crew's hearts, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Morrison, status on the package? Ready when you are, Captain. Sarah looked at the tactical display one last time. 200 alien ships surrounded them, weapons charging for what would certainly be the final bombardment. The Defiance had maybe 30 seconds before they were vapor. It was enough. Rodriguez, ship-wide communication. Her first officer nodded. You're on, Captain. Sarah stood, straightening her uniform one last time. Around the galaxy, on screens both open and hidden, her image appeared beside the tactical display showing their impossible fight. My name is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance. If you're watching this, you're seeing something that hasn't happened in 1,000 years. Someone standing up to the hegemony and living long enough to tell the story. The ship shook again as alien weapons found their mark. Warning lights flashed red throughout the bridge. We are 1,200 humans aboard one ship, facing an armada that has conquered the galaxy. We are outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in every measurable way. But we are still here. We are still fighting. And most importantly, we are still free. Sarah could see the alien weapons charging on her display, building to a level that would erase them from existence. To every enslaved world watching this transmission, the hegemony told you they were invincible. They told you resistance was impossible. They told you that surrender was the only option. She smiled, and somehow that smile carried across space to 1,000 worlds where hope had been forgotten. They lied. The alien fleet fired as one, 200 ships unleashing everything they had. But in the seconds before the energy reached them, Morrison activated the package, humanity's final gift to the galaxy. The Defiance didn't just die. It exploded with the force of a small star, its overloaded reactors detonating in a carefully calculated chain reaction that had taken Earth's finest minds 3 years to design. The blast consumed 6 alien ships instantly and crippled a dozen more. But more importantly, The explosion created a quantum resonance burst that amplified their broadcast signal beyond anything the hegemony could stop or contain. Sarah Chen's final words reached every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. This is humanity's declaration. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. We do not yield. And now you know that freedom is possible, because you've seen it with your own eyes. The transmission ended, but its effects had only begun. On Kepler 442b, the Alterans rose in open rebellion within hours. On Wolf 359c, the Zephyrians began organized resistance for the first time in centuries. On 47 worlds across the galaxy, species that had forgotten the meaning of defiance remembered what it felt like to say no. Fleet Commander Zextar stood in the debris field that had been the Defiance, watching his damage reports mount. 12 ships destroyed or crippled. His flagship scarred by primitive kinetic weapons. His perfect record shattered by a species he had never heard of 24 hours earlier. But as he read the reports flooding in from across the Empire, uprisings, rebellions, entire worlds declaring independence, he realized that the humans had accomplished something far more devastating than military victory. They had proven that the impossible was merely difficult. The quantum broadcasts continued to spread, carrying the story of humanity's stand to every corner of the galaxy. Within days, the name Sarah Chan was being whispered in 1,000 languages on 1,000 worlds. The image of the Defiance, battered but unbowed, became a symbol that no amount of hegemony propaganda could erase. The humans had been right about one thing: they hadn't come to win a battle. They had come to start a war for the soul of the galaxy itself. And as Fleet Commander Zextar filed his report with Hegemony High Command, documenting the first military defeat in their species' history, he found himself wondering what other surprises these remarkable humans might have in store. The age of the hegemony's unchallenged rule was over. The age of resistance had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the surviving ships of Earth's fleet received Sarah Chen's final transmission and began to plan their next move in a war that would reshape the galaxy forever. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching the blue-green marble of Earth rotate slowly beneath them. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, unchanged by the galactic war that now raged across 100 systems. But appearances, as humanity had taught the galaxy, could be deceiving. Admiral, his aide approached with a datapad, the latest intelligence reports from the quantum network. Webb accepted the device and scrolled through the information. The quantum network, Sarah Chen's gift to the galaxy, had evolved far beyond its original purpose. What began as a broadcast system had become an untraceable communication web connecting every resistance cell, every freedom fighter, every enslaved world that dared to dream of liberation. The numbers were staggering. 63 systems in open revolt. 217 worlds providing covert support to resistance movements. The hegemony's vast empire, built over millennia of conquest, was fracturing at a rate that defied their ability to respond. Status of the Kepler operation? Webb asked. Complete success, sir. The 442nd Liberation Fleet destroyed 3 hegemony garrison bases and freed over 2 million Alterans. They're requesting additional supplies and technical advisors. Webb nodded. The 442nd was one of 40 human fleets now operating across the galaxy, small, fast, and utterly unpredictable. They struck where the enemy was weakest, disappeared before reinforcements could arrive, and left behind something more valuable than military damage. Proof that the hegemony could be beaten. And the Proxima situation? His aide's expression darkened. Intelligence confirms the hegemony is massing their 3rd Grand Fleet at Proxima Centauri. Over 1,500 ships, Admiral. They're calling it Operation Final Solution. Webb felt a familiar chill. 1,500 ships, the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen, aimed directly at Earth. The hegemony's response to 3 months of rebellion was exactly what humanity had expected. Overwhelming, brutal, and absolute. ETA to Earth? 6 weeks, sir. 6 weeks. Webb looked down at his homeworld again, thinking of the 4 billion people who had no idea what was coming. The Solar Defense Council had been clear from the beginning: Earth would never surrender, never negotiate, never yield. But facing 1,500 hegemony warships with humanity's remaining fleets was like throwing stones at a hurricane. Unless, of course, you understood how humans really fought. "Signal the fleet commanders," Webb ordered. "Operation Prometheus is a go." Grand Admiral Vashti stood in the central command chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Third Grand Fleet's assembly. 1,500 ships, every available vessel in the hegemony's vast navy, all converging on one simple objective: the complete annihilation of humanity. The humans had cost them dearly, not just in ships and resources, but in something far more precious: the aura of invincibility that had kept the galaxy in line for 1,000 years. Every day brought new reports of rebellion, new systems declaring independence, new species finding the courage to say no. It all traced back to one moment, one ship, one human captain who had refused to accept the natural order of things. "Admiral," his intelligence officer approached with obvious nervousness. "We've intercepted communications suggesting the humans are planning something called Operation Prometheus. Details?" "None, sir. The transmissions are heavily encrypted using their quantum communication system. We can detect the signals but cannot decode them." Vashti's mandibles clicked with irritation. The human communication network was a constant source of frustration. Every attempt to infiltrate or disable it had failed. It was as if the entire galaxy had developed a nervous system that the hegemony couldn't touch. "It doesn't matter," he decided. "Whatever they're planning, 1,500 ships will be more than sufficient. How many vessels can Earth possibly field?" "Intelligence estimates no more than 200, Admiral. And most of those are converted civilian craft with minimal combat capability." Vashti felt satisfaction ripple through his chest cavity. 200 ships against 1,500. Even accounting for the humans' disturbing tactical ingenuity, the mathematics were clear. This would be the end of the rebellion, the end of hope, and the beginning of a new era of absolute hegemony control. "Order the fleet to advance," he commanded. "Maximum speed to the Sol system. I want every human ship destroyed and every human world burned to ash. The galaxy will learn that defying the hegemony has consequences." As his orders transmitted across the massive fleet, Vashti allowed himself to imagine the moment when human resistance finally ended. The silence that would fall across the quantum networks. The despair that would settle over every enslaved world as they realized their champions were dead. The restoration of proper order. But deep in the mathematics of space and time, forces were already in motion that would make such dreams impossible. Across the galaxy, on worlds both free and enslaved, beings who had never heard of Earth were preparing to act on a scale that defied comprehension. Because Sarah Chun had been right about one thing: once you prove that freedom is possible, it becomes inevitable. "Admiral, we're receiving confirmation signals from all sectors," Webb's communications officer reported. "Operation Prometheus is synchronized and ready." Webb nodded, studying the tactical display that showed not just the immediate solar system, but a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated hegemony positions, still formidable, but scattered and responding to crises across dozens of fronts. Blue markers showed allied positions, and there were so many more than there had been 3 months ago. "Final count, Commander Hayes?" His tactical officer consulted her displays. "Confirmed participants, 4,732 ships from 81 different species, Admiral, plus ground forces, orbital platforms, and civilian support networks on over 300 worlds." The numbers were staggering. What had begun as humanity's desperate stand had grown into the largest military alliance in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together, united by a simple idea: the right to determine their own fate. And the hegemony response? Exactly as predicted, sir. They've concentrated their forces for a decisive strike on Earth, leaving their outer territories vulnerable. Intelligence estimates they've pulled garrison fleets from over 40 systems to assemble the Third Grand Fleet. Webb smiled grimly. The hegemony's greatest strength, their overwhelming force, was also their greatest weakness. They were used to fighting one enemy at a time, crushing resistance before it could spread. They had never faced a coordinated galaxy-wide rebellion. Today, they would learn the difference. Signal to all Allied commands, Webb ordered. Sarah Chen's sacrifice lit the spark. Today we become the fire that burns their empire to ash. Execute Operation Prometheus. Across the galaxy, the largest coordinated military action in history began simultaneously. On 43 worlds, Liberation fleets struck hegemony garrisons weakened by the transfer of forces to the Third Grand Fleet. On 17 major trade routes, Allied raiders emerged from hiding to attack supply convoys. On the hegemony's administrative worlds, resistance cells that had been planning for months launched coordinated uprisings. And at the center of it all, racing toward Earth with overwhelming force, Grand Admiral Vashti I's fleet suddenly found itself receiving distress calls from across their empire. Not scattered raids or minor rebellions, but a systematic dismantling of everything they had built. In the space of 6 hours, the hegemony lost more territory than they had in the previous century. But the greatest surprise was yet to come. Defense Coordinator Lu Wei watched the tactical displays with satisfaction as the plan unfolded exactly as Earth Command had envisioned. The hegemony fleet was impressive, 1,500 ships arranged in perfect formation, advancing on Earth with the inexorable momentum of a force that had never known defeat. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Coordinator, her tactical officer reported, the hegemony fleet will reach the outer system in 72 hours. All Allied forces report ready. Lu nodded. 72 hours to the battle that would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of the galaxy itself. Around her, the defense platform hummed with activity as teams made final preparations for humanity's greatest gambit. Status of the Prometheus package? Fully charged and ready for deployment, Coordinator. All targeting solutions confirmed. Lu allowed herself a moment of pride. The Prometheus package was humanity's masterpiece. 3 months of concentrated effort by every scientist, engineer, and tactical genius Earth could produce. It was audacious, impossible, and utterly human in its complete disregard for conventional wisdom. Sarah Chen would have loved it. Signal to all commands, Lu ordered. The enemy is coming. Let's show them what happens when you threaten Earth. In the depths of space, ancient satellites that had been dismissed as communication relays began to hum with power. On the Moon, installations that appeared to be mining operations revealed their true purpose. Throughout the asteroid belt, hollowed-out rocks that had seemed like natural formations started broadcasting targeting data. For 3 months, while the galaxy watched the spread of rebellion, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Not just militarily, but scientifically, technologically, and philosophically. They had studied every battle, analyzed every tactic, and learned every lesson the hegemony had to teach. Now it was time for the final examination. As the Third Grand Fleet approached, confident in their overwhelming superiority, they were about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their ships or their courage or their tactical brilliance. It was their absolute refusal to fight fair when the survival of their species was at stake. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.